The main one that I would think of as a thinker who might have had impact would have been Bishop Rush, Archbishop Rush from Brisbane, and certainly Archbishop Gleeson here in Adelaide. Many of the other bishops from who originally had been priests in the YCW dioceses were likely to have had YCW sympathies and formation, but no, the outstanding mind and leader would seem to me to have been Father Brian Burke, who went on to become, I think, international chaplain. Yes, but at least in terms of publication and my awareness, there wasn't a great reflection or depth. Essentially, the YCW was a one-to-one a movement of young workers and priests to the experience of the young workers, the possibility there for influence to build a new youth for a new world and a new Australia, I think. But the particular steps of that, I remember the height of the YCW enthusiasm and unity was Broken Hill in, I think, 1968, my impression. And at that stage, little evidence to us anyway of tensions or splits. There was general enthusiasm for the council, for liturgy renewal, which showed in the liturgy, a very energetic liturgy at Broken Hill. And the movement had moved here then to trying to examine what were the worker issues, and these were voted on for what would be the matters for national campaigns. But already there was showing a tendency for the degree of formation at the top level of the movement, the senior positions, was showing a certain impatience, to my mind, with the base, and they wanted to have each diocese think about writing its own inquiry, which was beyond many, and people often reach a stage, I think, where their level of formation allows them skills that they don't realise it took them a long time to get to what they're doing. And
so they wanted to move from national inquiries to diocesan inquiries
without realising that that was just much more easily said than done. But it also showed where the leadership was starting to have a degree of experience that was so good, it was so experienced that it ran the risk of not realising the ground they'd covered themselves in their formation, and whether or not other places with less resources could actually match that. I think the great majority of places did in fact use the national campaigns regardless. But for again, for bishops, for Vatican Council.
What about Gallagher? Was Gallagher at Port Pirie already at that time?
Gallagher, for example, his name in that presentation that we gave to Cardijn in 1958, he and the Archbishop are the two names inside the front cover with photographs.
I see.
Interesting that the first, the bishops were both there, and where Bevich's remarks in the inscription were, this is a sign of the young workers' loyalty to the Church, and Bishop Gallagher's underneath was, this is a sign of the young workers' loyalty to Her Majesty the Queen, which was fairly current at that stage with the Queen Elizabeth so young.
But would you describe Gallagher as a movement man, dynamic?
He would have been sympathetic, and the movement was quite strong in Port Pirie, but I don't have any recollection of him, say, at national councils. That was a bit of a separator. I know that Goody showed up at national council because he was chairman, Episcopal chairman, for the NCGM in those days.
Okay, well that's significant, yeah.
And certainly the one that I knew who would have studied and put most into Cardijn would have been Jimmy Gleeson, the Archbishop here later. But again, he wasn't, he was an organiser, but not an analyst, and he tended to take the movements as they were given. But and also he didn't get to the first meeting of the council, the first year of the council. I think he got to later ones at that.
But anyway, from what I can gather, he had that responsibility for the YCS on behalf of the bishops at one stage, and in my own meetings with him, actually, when I was a young full timer, that's my recollection. He was very strongly in favour of the YCW, to the point that he actually went. Even I remember, he got into, or some people, a guy came here to talk about youth ministry, and Jimmy Gleeson was not very happy with him.
Right. He said that use of the word ministry was associated with the Vatican Council, but it's interesting that the word chosen in ministry itself implied a modelling on ministry within the church, which of course, not in theory but in practice, had a heavy clerical tradition. And certainly the bishops were aware with YCW that YCW was not about the role of the laity primarily within the church itself, although it wouldn't exclude that. But it was much broader. It was the whole life of the young person was seen as the lay apostles.
Just on another bishop, what about Prindiville from Perth?
Prindiville again, I think, would have been sympathetic because the YCW was strong there, but I don't think of him as more than one of the bishops who were generally supportive.
Guildford Young?
Gilly Young was the intellectual of the bishops. His specialty was liturgy, and his way of thinking and of moving was with tertiary and graduate groups. He supported YCW in principle, I think, but he had not had a great deal of experience. He had been a secretary, I think, at the Apostolic Delegate's office, but he was an intellectual and a liturgist, so not a conspicuous YCW bishop.
Did you ever have any relationship with Simmons from Melbourne?
No, he was the one who wrote the handbook on Catholic action, I think. He was the best defender of the whole concept of Catholic action and specialised Catholic action, and he gave it a respectability. It had the concept of being totally adrift. In the 1930s, lay apostolate could mean whatever anybody wanted, and whether you were making investments or pouring out cups of tea, whatever, everything that suited a bishop was called lay apostolate. Everybody knew that Pius XI was promoting Catholic action, so Catholic action became whatever took the fancy of the, not that that's in an unfair way, but whatever lay effort the bishop noticed was liable to be christened as Catholic action. And it took the ANSCA, Australian National Secretariat of Catholic Action. It developed the, over a period of time, the adoption of the Cardijn, the YCW model for Australia. There had been some debates about other models, but they finally came down and handbooks were prepared, and the meeting was largely a promotion from the Australian National Secretariat of Catholic Action, one of the heads of whom was Santa Maria, but not the only one. Exactly how that came to be linked to Frank from Melbourne, Frank Chaplin?
Frank Lombard.
Frank Lombard. Now, whether he got ideas from the Secretary of Catholic Action, whether he'd read, I don't know. But there was a marriage, therefore, of the energies of Frank Lombard and of the early YCWs with the authority that came from the Australian National Secretariat of Catholic Action.